So the Supreme Court's recent 8-1 decision in the Rahimi case is now being directly used to support the California magazine ban in the Duncan versus Bonta challenge. So let's talk about what just happened with the California magazine ban case. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, we have some important updates when it comes to the California magazine ban case Duncan versus Bonta. You may recall that recently the Ninth Circuit en banc panel decided to kind of mess with some of their rules and take the California magazine ban case immediately as a comeback case. In that case, and in the Duncan decision, essentially, they decided to fudge some of their rules and break their rules so that they can control the case. Now, that was kind of an unprecedented move by the Ninth Circuit, but now, after the recent Supreme Court 8-1 decision in Rahimi, that case has been submitted to the en banc panel as support for why the Ninth Circuit should in fact side with the state of California and uphold the state's magazine ban. The use of the language in Rahimi was something we were concerned about, and now we've seen some of this language being pulled from the Rahimi decision and weaponized in the Duncan California magazine ban case as support for why California should win this lawsuit. Now, for those not aware, Duncan versus Bonta is a case which involves the California possession and purchase ban on so-called large capacity magazines. Essentially, this is just a state ban on any magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. There was also a grandfather provision that was changed with the recent law. And so there's a lot of things here at play in California when it comes to magazines. Now, this law was originally challenged at a district court level in front of a district court judge, Judge Roger T. Benitez, who issued a ruling and found that this law was in fact a violation of the Second Amendment. This led to what is known as Freedom Week in the state of California. Now, after the state of California originally lost, they appealed that decision up to the Ninth Circuit, and a 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit reviewed that decision of the lower court, Judge Benitez, and ultimately they agreed with him. Then the case was sent to the Ninth Circuit en banc panel originally for an appeal, and originally the first en banc panel in the Ninth Circuit ruled in favor of the state of California upholding this magazine ban. Now, again, this was pre-2022 and pre-Bruin. And what ended up happening is then there was a request for Supreme Court review in this Duncan case. But the Duncan case, this whole magazine ban issue was put on hold because the Supreme Court was set to rule in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which they did rule in, and they affirmed that text as informed by relevant history and tradition is the correct analysis, not intermediate scrutiny or balancing of interests. And because of Bruin, they then sent the Duncan case all the way back down. They granted, vacated, and remanded the case, and it got back in the hands of Judge Benitez. Now, on re-review, Judge Benitez just simply reaffirmed what he said before, using the Bruin analysis, using text, history, and tradition, finding again that California's ban is in fact invalid. Now, as we all knew, California was not going to let that sit, so they decided to appeal to the Ninth Circuit once again. Now, this is where things got really interesting in this Duncan case. Originally, this new Duncan case was set to go in front of a 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit, but then the same en banc panel, the same 10 randomly selected judges and the chief judge decided to take the Duncan case back immediately as a comeback case. And they did this and they kind of broke some of their rules to take control of the Duncan case immediately. Now, another really important thing that the en banc panel here did is they issued a stay on Judge Benitez's decision, his new decision. Ultimately, they found that the state of California was likely to succeed on the merits of their challenge, and therefore, ultimately what they did is they ruled in favor of the state of California, halting what Judge Benitez said in his new order. And a lot of people had issues with the Ninth Circuit and what they just did, what the en banc panel did, breaking a bunch of their rules, taking this case as a comeback. And even some of the judges on that panel wrote dissents and opinions saying that their colleagues were breaking the rules and they were doing something wrong. But ultimately, the Duncan case was then moved forward to an en banc panel review. And back in March, the en banc panel here heard oral arguments in this case. Now, during those arguments, there were a lot of debates about the Ninth Circuit breaking the rules. That was something that bled actually into open court, where you had judges like Van Dyke and others calling out their colleagues saying, hey, this case is improper. We should not be reviewing this case. We are breaking our rules. And again, we are affirming that we do not believe in the Second Amendment. So there was a lot of interesting back and forth in the oral arguments in the Duncan case about what the Ninth Circuit is doing. And then there was a lot of debate about the historical analysis that happened at the lower court level. What does Bruin require? What is the text, history, and tradition standard? How does it really apply? How does the state meet this burden? So there was a lot of debate about that at the oral arguments. And then also what's important for what just happened with the Rahimi case is there was discussion during the oral arguments in Duncan about maybe the Duncan case being put on hold until Rahimi is decided by the Supreme Court. Some of the Ninth Circuit en banc panel judges believed that the decision in Rahimi would in fact impact this Duncan case. And now we have a decision in Rahimi. The Rahimi decision was an 8-1 decision in favor of the federal government upholding the federal restrictions and the federal possession restrictions on people subject to domestic violence restraining orders. And one of the really interesting things also about Rahimi is that in that decision, the court there talked about maybe being able to pull multiple historical evidence and analogs together to justify a restriction. At least that's what they did specifically in the Rahimi decision. Now, what has played out since that is we recently just got a supplemental letter submitted to the Duncan court, the en banc panel of the Ninth Circuit, using Rahimi as authority and arguing that Judge Benitez erred in his analysis down below, that he stayed too true to requiring a historical twin or an exact analog, and instead under Rahimi, California should win this case because their historical justifications do in fact support this ban, that they presented enough analogs that taken together can support California's restrictions on magazines. Now, this letter of California submitted to the Ninth Circuit states that Rahimi reiterated that the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited, does not sweep indiscriminately, and is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever. The court recognized that some courts have misunderstood the methodology of Bruen and Heller, which were not meant to suggest a law trapped in amber. It criticized the Fifth Circuit and the dissenting justice for committing the error of reading Bruen to require a historical twin rather than a historical analog. And there they cite to, I believe, Kavanaugh, which stated imposing a test that demands overly specific analogs has serious problems. Actually, I believe that was Barrett. Now, they go on to state in this letter that that is the same error committed by the district court in this case. As the Supreme Court explained, the appropriate analysis involves considering whether the challenge regulation is consistent with the principles that underpin our regulatory tradition. And here they are citing to Barrett again, analogical reasoning under Bruen demands a wider lens. Historical regulations reveal a principle, not a mold. And then they state that in ascertaining those principles, moreover, it is appropriate to consider post-ratification laws and practices. They're citing to Kavanaugh and Rahimi, where he stated that post-ratification history can be important for interpreting vague constitutional text and determining exceptions to individual constitutional rights. They state in their letter that applying the appropriate methodology, the court had no trouble concluding that the historical analogs invoked by the government were sufficient to justify the challenged law, even though those analogs were by no means identical to Section 922G8C1. Here, the principle emerging from the long tradition of government restrictions and prohibitions on especially dangerous weapons and accessories justifies the challenge restrictions on large capacity magazines. So that is the letter submitted by the state of California to the Ninth Circuit en banc panel using Rahimi as new authority to justify this ban on magazines. Now, in some ways, this is something we were concerned about. We knew that they were going to pull some of the language out of Rahimi, some of the unfortunate language, to try to justify various, gun control laws. We especially knew California was going to do that. We knew that the Ninth Circuit probably would pull some of the Rahimi decision as justification to rule the way that they want. So again, concerning in some ways that now you're seeing Rahimi trickle down into some of these other courts, some of that language, some of that unfortunate language about the Second Amendment not being a law that is trapped in amber. We knew that that was going to be used, and now it's being used here with the magazine ban in California. So I just wanted to update you guys on what's going on with the California Duncan decision. So if you guys like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.